Some people say that while they're usually important, first impressions are often entirely wrong, and there's a reason why they say that. It's likely to be true. For example, it seems that for the first few years of someone's life, they're perfectly ordinary people by the standards of a world as demented as the one we live in. However, at some point along the line, be it during childhood, adolescence, or heck even during the adult years, signs start to show up and you start to realize that maybe things aren't so ordinary for some people. Maybe these people have trouble interacting with others, be it not reading subtle emotional cues that others can easily understand, like, say, sarcasm. It might not be easy to keep eye contact, or heck, it might not be easy to actually speak to other people in the first place. They might have a habit of thinking very logically or literally. They might have an increased sense of anxiety around large crowds of people or sudden loud noises, or their interests can be narrowly defined to a small set of subjects. The list goes on, really. Whatever the signs, often it might just be that they have autism. Well, what does having autism mean? To put it simply, having autism, or Asperger's syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, means having a social disorder that often focuses on a triad of areas: social/emotional skills, communication skills, and behavioral skills, just to name a few. This can affect them in a number of different ways and to varying degrees, hence the commonly used term autistic spectrum disorder. No one knows exactly what causes someone to become autistic. However, it most certainly isn't caused by something idiotic like vaccines, but all the same, it is simply a thing that happens to a fair amount of people, regardless of what the cause actually is. Now, because autism can be a difficult thing to fully understand, like most aspects of life, a lot of myths tend to spread around that people assume as fact, when they're really not. As such, I want to debunk these myths and explain the reality behind them as best as I possibly can. To get the big one out of the way immediately, autism cannot be cured. It is not a disease, it doesn't harm the body in any way, and it is most certainly not something that should inhibit one's potential, a point that I'll get onto later on. Being autistic just means your brain's wired a little bit differently than most people, and while there are some unintentional effects that come about because of it, they can at least be treated. See if there's an ASD unit in your local school or community. Seek autistic therapy groups that deal in areas such as sensory and motor skills, speech and language, and so on. It's been reported that about 95% of people who go to these sessions, especially in the early years of their life, improve in their more troublesome areas over time, and often to such a remarkable extent where you'd hardly think that they have some sort of disorder if you met them for the first time. For instance, I myself am autistic and have a good amount of experience with this. When I was younger, I used to be utterly terrified of going to the cinema. Whenever I went in there, I was just struck with the same bout of sudden, irrational fear, similar to that which appears when someone with the fear of spiders finds when lying next to their pillow one morning. However, with the help of the aforementioned therapies, I gradually went from not being able to go in there at all, to only having to leave during the especially loud bits, to watching entire movies without needing to leave even once. And it's not just that, I've managed to become more independent and not need help in doing certain things such as going out into a large town on my own. I've become more aware of the people around me and how they feel and react to certain things, thus making sure I take great care to being appropriate and mindful of them. And while it's still a bit tricky at times, I can actually deal with being around a large number of people pretty well. As you can tell, it's worked fine for me, and I know I can do just as good a job for anyone else with ASD. Look, it may seem a bit scary and unknown at first, but please, give it a chance and who knows, it could really help to reduce some of the more irritating aspects of autism. As well as this, just because someone is autistic doesn't mean they can't feel empathy for other people. They do feel emotion for others, but it can be a bit more difficult for them to show it naturally due to a simple lack of awareness. It's not unheard of for someone to start ranting profusely about a certain issue and genuinely not take into account what others around them may think without meaning any offense. It certainly doesn't mean in any way that they're sociopaths or something similarly ridiculous. And thanks to the widespread jackassery on the internet and people lying about having autism as an excuse for said jackassery, there are a sizable amount of people who believe that anyone with Asperger's is simply using it to cover up their irritating behavior. And for the most part, they're not. If they do something wrong, they will simply use autism as an explanation for certain mistakes they make, not as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Anyone who does use it in that manner, on the other hand, is an enormous jackass, regardless of anything else. Oh, and before we forget about it, being autistic does not automatically make someone a savant-like genius in certain areas in the style of Rain Man. It's not exactly helped by the fact that Hans Asperger, the medical doctor which Asperger's syndrome is officially named after, dubbed people who have it little professors, but all the same, it does not make them a Rain Man style person who suffers in social skills but has some kind of special talent. Remember, this is a spectrum, meaning that not everyone shares this kind of idiot savant-like characteristic. Incidentally, this also applies for the belief that someone with autism is mentally challenged. This varies from person to person. Most people with Asperger's are no different from the average guy when it comes to their level of intelligence, although some people with Asperger's are more prone to having other associated difficulties, also known as co-occurring needs. Again, it varies wildly from person to person, so please don't make any judgments before you actually meet someone with autism. And finally, being autistic is not a bad thing, not even in the slightest. Some people tend to think that it's a problem, but it really isn't. At worst, it's simply just something that makes life a little bit more difficult, but still manageable otherwise. And how do I know this? 2 reasons. First, many of the nicest, funniest, intelligent, and downright awesome people I've ever met are autistic. And secondly, as I've said before, I'm autistic myself. Autism is something that likely did influence how I am today, but like with everyone else who has it, it doesn't encompass my entire being and personality. Regardless of me being autistic, I still have my strengths as a person. I've got a very creative mind. I can get my thoughts out in writing very well. I'm a kind and funny person that other people enjoy being around. I want to be properly motivated in doing something. I'm quite optimistic, even despite my low days, and the list goes on and on. However, I also have my flaws and needs. I'm not very good at making on-the-spot decisions. I often need to be reminded when I'm inappropriate or when I'm talking too loudly. I still have a bit of difficulty trying to manage my stress during more troublesome times. I'm not perfect. Not by a long shot, but then again, no one is. That doesn't mean I'm invalid as a person in any way, shape, or form. If I've managed to write several stories that people say are really good, make a lot of good friends through just being myself, earn over 600 subscribers on my official YouTube channel, and generally become a good person, then there's absolutely no reason why any other autistic person, or hell, just anyone in general, can't do the same. Believe me, you have just as much a chance to become a fulfilled, happy person in this life as I do, no matter what. I hope you've all learned a little bit more about autism. Thank you for watching, and have a great day, all.